Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Trading futures, options on futures, and retail off-exchange foreign currency transactions involve substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances, knowledge, and financial resources. You may lose all or more of your initial investment. Opinions, market data, and recommendations are subject to change at any time. Past performance is not indicative of future results. So, folks, only fund a futures account with risk capital. Okay, that means money you can afford to lose without lengthening your retirement horizon or affecting your ability to maintain your lifestyle. Okay, if you have any questions about where you may fall on the risk capital curve, so to speak, please feel free to talk to your rep in our office about that, and we'll be happy to address your questions about risk. Okay. All right. So one of the things that we got over the last week were some questions about different trade setup ideas, and people were looking for ways to manipulate the chart in a way that that could allow them to, pare down, the amount of data on the screen and try and clean things up a little bit. So that's really the core of what we do with these presentations. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, my name is Patrick, and I do a presentation usually about Sierra every Monday, and or some different aspect of Sierra chart. So if you're an Infinity client, you get Sierra chart for free if you do 10 round turns every 30 days. Otherwise, it's $19.95. All right. And what I wanted to do, I was messing around a little bit today, and I thought I would try to focus the presentation on one sort of specific idea. And hopefully it's enough to get the wheels turning a little bit, and you can try to apply this to some of the things that you're doing on your own. Okay. So it'll be brief. We're going to focus on one specific thing, and then we'll take some questions, and that will be the extent of it today. All right. So here's basically what we're looking at. On the left-hand side, we've got a 60-minute chart of the E-mini S&P, and then there's a line that is here, which is a 8-period EMA on a 60-minute time frame. Okay, so that's that green dashed line. And then we've got a study down here that is measuring the angle of the line. Okay, now sometimes people ask us about how they can, make decisions based on slope or angles or whatever. Sierra has a study that's called Study Angle that allows you to measure an angle from a point X number of bars back to the current point and then yield a value. So in this case right now it's -48. So if we were to go right-click studies, we'll see that there's a moving averages study, although you'll notice that I have only the one displayed. I don't have the other two displayed. They're both set to hidden. All right, I have this little short name here with the name label checked, which is why I'm getting behavior of the label being visible. All right, so if you want to name your study and you want a line or a little text label there, you can put a short name in and then check this little name label box. And so right now we're only having the 60-minute 8 EMA up here. All right, there's the other ones, the 34 and the 15, these are not being drawn because these two are set to hidden currently, as we can see here. Okay, so we've got the moving averages, and then we've got a study here called Study Angle. And when you add the Study Angle study, it's not like adding a moving average or adding a stochastic or something. You need to base it on something else. It could be based on the current price of the market. It could be based on a study. In this case, we are basing the angle of the study on another study. And the way to control that, and this is a concept that is going to come to the forefront in other applications of Sierra as well, is this drop down right up here. When you add a study to Sierra, usually the based on is the main price graph. So you're adding a stochastic, it's based on the main price graph. You're adding volume, it's based on the main price graph. In this case, we're actually basing the angle not on the main price graph, but rather the moving averages study. And when you choose that in this drop down, to the right over here under input data, you're going to have to pick what subgraph are we looking at? What about the moving averages study are we measuring? And you'll notice that when you select that study, this little drop down becomes a reference to the moving averages study that we were just previously looking at. All right, one choice is the 34 that I have hidden. The other one was average 3, which I never had a label for, which is why it just says average 3. And then the last one here says 60-minute EMA average 1, which is the one I want. And the length is, it defaults to 10. And basically, how far back are we looking? The objective of the Study Angle study for a chart, like a 60-minute chart in my eyes, is to establish a longer-term trend. And by longer term, I mean, in this case, basically 10 hours, okay? Not extremely long term, but one of the things that our clients are asking us about frequently is how can I juxtapose a longer time frame event or some aspect of a longer time frame chart onto a shorter time frame chart and then include that metric in my creation of this alert capability. So on the right-hand side, folks, you'll see these blue and red background colors, all right? And the objective here is to show you how you can employ a study that we use called color background based on alert condition, where you can combine a series of studies together and then yield an output in the form of a background color or a color bar or an arrow or something like this. In this case, we're going to use the background color. All right, and so that is the objective, is that we believe that you can reduce decision fatigue and you can clean the chart up a little bit and hopefully speed up your decision-making process just a little bit if you can have the chart pre-filter these conditions for you in a way that is visibly appealing and quick, where you're not having to eyeball all these things across all the time frames and all the charts you're looking at. Meanwhile, you've got last night's trading related video from your email in your head and the chat room here and the chat room there. It's a lot coming at us. So overall, what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of processing that you have to do mentally in that sort of moment before you decide intuitively to get into a position or otherwise. All right, so that's the overall idea behind the use of a study like this, is to combine a series of filters into one, and then you can even hide the individual lines, okay, which we'll demonstrate here in a little bit. All right, so again, on the left-hand side, we've got a 60-minute chart of the E-mini S&P with a 8-period EMA based on that 60-minute time frame, and then we've got a line down here that measures the angle of the 60-minute EMA. All right, on the right-hand side, let's just right-click, go to Studies. We'll talk briefly about the studies that we have here. I have a little notepad thing up and ready to go because a lot of times I use Notepad when I'm trying to combine these things together, just for a place to type out my thoughts or try to type a formula out. I'm going to move that to another screen for a second. We'll come back to it. And we've got basically 6 studies on here. It actually goes to ID number 7, but that's because I had one at the top and I removed it. So that's why it says ID 7, but there's only six in the list. So the first one is the moving averages study, which is similar to the left-hand chart, except for this one, I've got 8 and 34, and I still have this 15 simple. But if you look at the subgraphs tab, the average 3, which is the 15 simple, is not being displayed. So what's happening is we have an 8-period EMA on a 5-minute time frame and a 34-period EMA on a 5-minute time frame. I have these short labels in here. Okay, that's why we're getting the behavior of the label like this. Okay, so we've got the short name and then we've got name label selected, which is why those are visible. If it bothers you that the labels are on top of the candles like this, you can scroll like this a little bit with your mouse and then right click and choose lock fill space. And if you have lock fill space on, it'll always keep these this amount of distance between the current bar and the y-axis. Another place that you can check to make sure that you have lock fill space on is if you look down to the very bottom right of the chart on the right side, see that capital L that's in that green box? That's how you know that lock fill space is on. Related, if you scroll back in time, this box in the bottom right turns red. If you're ever looking at the chart and it's not moving and you're wondering why, the first thing you should do is scroll down to the bottom, put your eyes down to the bottom right and make sure that you hadn't inadvertently scrolled back in time. Because if you do, the chart will not advance. If you are scrolled all the way to the front, it will advance automatically and it's green. If you're scrolled back in time, it's going to be red, it will not advance. All right, so let's go back to that studies list for a second. Right click, go to studies. And then if you look down here, moving averages, we've got study angle, another study angle. We've got a third study angle, which I'll explain in a minute. And then we've got 2 color background studies. So to whittle these out here from most complex to simplest, the 2 color background studies are the blue and the red backgrounds. We're going to get to those in a minute. This study angle here is an overlay from the 60-minute time frame. It's this green thing down here at the bottom. All right, it's the same exact study, except it's overlaid onto the 5-minute chart. And then you've got 2 study angles here. You could probably guess which one is which. Okay, the blue one, if you go to study angle and we look at the settings and inputs, the input is based on the moving averages, and the first input is the 8. So I made it the same color. So the blue line down here is associated with the blue 8 EMA that's in the main price graph. All right, and if we go back to the second one here, the study angle, this one is based on the 34, and it's the magenta color. All right, so I just color coded those so it's easy to tell what's what. And then you've got the moving averages, which we already talked about. All right. So what were we trying to do with this idea? Okay. This is, and again, this is not a system that you just, you put on and you're trading your live account tomorrow. I really want to demonstrate the concepts. You will probably find ways to optimize something like this to where it like looks better than what you see here on the chart in terms of signaling. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Okay, curve fitting or sort of tweaking the system so that it looks good with today's data, that's not a great way to develop a system. All right, but this is really a good mechanism for us to explain how to use the mechanics properly, which is why we're doing this. All right, so I have a 60-minute on the left and then 5-minute on the right. When you're trying to build a formula that is basically a translation that the computer understands of something you are trying to achieve, you have to think about it out loud or write it down. One of the things that this person who suggested this idea originally to me said was that he is looking for 2 indications that the market is in some degree of an uptrend on one time frame, and then 1 indication that the market is in the same uptrend on a bigger time frame. Well, what better way to achieve an end like that than to use the study angle, or there are a couple other ways you could do it, but study angle would be one on the 5-minute, and then measure the angle of the study on the longer time frame and use that as well. And that's what I would like to demonstrate how to do here today. All right, and then I'll show you how we use the formula. The first thing that I want to do though is I'm going to remove the study angle study down here, which is ID 5. And actually this might mess up my formula. So before I do that, I'm actually just going to duplicate the chart. This is another trick, everybody. If you are going to mess with something that looks the way you want, one piece of advice I can give is right click, duplicate the chart so that the chart, it just makes a copy of what you already had. So you're not going to mess up your original one. All right. That way we've got a copy we can work off. So if we screw this up too badly, we could just close it and we still have the original. Do it all the time. All right, so I'm going to right click on here and go to studies, and I'm actually going to remove the study angle, which is going to mess up my color backgrounds because this formula is being referenced or this study is being referenced in these color backgrounds. That's okay. Let's just remove all 3 of them. So what we're left with is basically a much more naked looking chart that has no color backgrounds. It only has the study angles themselves, or excuse me, the moving averages and the moving averages of the exponential moving, the angle of the moving averages. All right, now how do we get the moving average from down here on the 60-minute to where it was a second ago on the 5-minute? All right, this is a critical thing that people are always asking about, and this is the main reason for this part of the presentation. You're going to right click and you're going to go to studies, and I like to click at the bottom of the list here so that the studies go in order. Okay, otherwise it would insert itself right up here. I just like it to be in the order I intended. And you're going to scroll down until you see study price overlay. Study price overlay is one of, if not the most powerful study inside Sierra. It's very open-ended. Okay, it's not like you just add study price overlay and the chart instantly knows what you're trying to do. Okay, you have to give it some instruction. But the very first step is to left click on study price overlay and click add, and then you're going to see it show up in the list here. Next, you're going to go to the settings button on the right hand side, and in the settings and inputs tab, this is where we decide what are we overlaying and from where is it coming. The very first choice is the most important, study to overlay. All right, study to overlay. So when you click that, you're going to see these choices come down here. The way it's always going to default is it's going to pick the first chart number in the chart book, which is chart number 1. The 60 just so happens to be the correct one in this case, but it won't always be. You're going to have to locate the chart number that you care about. And on that chart, what is it are we overlaying? Are we overlaying the main price graph? Well, I mean, you might want to in some cases where you have, let's say, a 60-minute chart and then a 5-minute chart below it or something like that. But in this case, we don't want to overlay the main price graph. We want to overlay the study angle. So I'm going to choose study angle like this. Now, at this point, the next important thing to do is pick the correct region. On the left-hand side, you've got a region drop-down menu, and it's going to start with 1, 2, and keep going. Region 1 is the main price graph. Okay, region 2 is the area below that. You can see that the chart in its infinite wisdom, is assuming that we want this indicator to go into region 3 because we already have stuff in region 2. It doesn't have to go into region 3. We could put the angle right on top of the other ones too if we really want to. But because I wanted to separate them by time frame, I wanted to choose a new region here. So I'm just going to choose region 3. All right, now get ready for a little curveball. All right, I'm going to I click apply and hit OK. If we look at the bottom of the chart, look at the way the 60-minute angle line looks. Okay, it should be somewhat obvious as to why it looks this way, but it does throw a bit of a curveball into the way we're going to look at this. Why does this one look like this sort of stair step, and this one down here on our original look like the original? Okay, the reason why that is because there's a variable in the study section for the overlay, which is called match source bars to destination bars. There are a lot of situations where you will want to say yes to this. This could even be one of them, although it won't really jive with our formula. You might want to just see the study angle based on a 60-minute time frame and just look at it this way. That's totally fine. There are going to be plenty of situations where someone might look at this this might be totally valid. Think about it. This is a 5-minute chart. All right. This is a 60-minute chart. So there's going to be 12 little sections of each of these for every 5-minute bar that goes by, right? Because as 5 minutes goes by 12 times, that's when one 60-minute period goes by. And this is being brought over from a 60-minute chart. So we can expect to see this stair-step behavior whenever you are bringing over a study from a bigger time frame onto a shorter time frame. All right. Now, the only time this presents an issue is if you are going to create a formula that is based on the presence of the line greater or equal, or excuse me, for example, like the slope of the line, or the whether the line is greater than the same study in one bar in history. Okay, we don't really care that much about this. What we care in this example is whether, the way that I created the formula was if the line is greater than 0. So it doesn't really matter to me that much whether the line looks like this, okay, or whether the line looks like the original. Because all I care about in the case of my formula here is I want to see if the study angle is greater than 0. Because ultimately what I'm going to do is show you how to write a formula that shows us the blue background when all of these angles are positive, or the red background when all the angles are negative. So it doesn't really matter to me that much whether or not this value is the same as the prior value or not, because all I care about is what is the current value. All right. However, if this bothers you visually and you want to go back to the way that it looks in the other example, if you go to the study, you can choose match source bars to destination and hit no, and it will go back to the original. All right. You're going to want to use this way if you are ever referring to the value of that 60-minute study angle versus the value of that 60-minute study angle 1 bar ago in history. Because this down here is being treated like its own 60-minute time frame. So these are not jiving together up here anymore. All right, this little current price here, this is like a full hour, whereas these candles are only going 5 minutes apiece. So if you don't link them together, you have to visually not care that this here is reflected to this of this market, because these points are not related in any way. They're not related. As an example of that, like look here down, see how we've got this like M shape here. Okay, so look at the curvature of the M down here. On this chart, it's at 2:05 in the afternoon, but that same curvature right here is at 10 o'clock last night. So you need to be able to manually or mentally disassociate this point of the line with like this point of the graph, because right now they're not jiving. If we were to undo what we just did, okay, by that match source bar to destination, now they jive again. Okay, now they're talking to each other. All right, so if you care about these things lining up, you will probably want to have it this way. If you don't care as much about that, then you can go the other way. All right, I know that's it's a little bit of an abstract concept, but it is kind of a complicated thing. And how do you, as a charting vendor, how would you display this info? There's really not a lot of great ways to do it, but this is definitely in my opinion, at least the most accurate way to do it. All right. So once we get to the point where, I'm going to minimize this for now. Once we get to the point where we have the study being displayed in a way that meets our needs, whether or not it's this way or the other way, the next thing is to devise the formula. And the way to devise a formula to have the chart tell you when something is happening, then is to learn what these ID numbers mean. All right, so if I right click, and I'll just bring this right back in a second. If I right click and go to studies, you'll see that every study has an ID number. And if we go to this settings section and go to subgraphs, you'll see that every study also has a subgraph number, or excuse me, every piece of the study has a subgraph number. So in this case, the moving averages study is ID2, and the first moving average is SG1, and the second one is SG2. All right. If we go to the study angle studies, we'll see the first one here, study angle ID3. So if I go to ID3 and I double click and go up here to subgraphs, we can see that the angle of the first moving average, the smaller one, the 8, is going to be ID3 SG1. Okay, ID3 SG1. And then if we go to the second one here, study ID number 4, look at this one, ID4 SG1. So when you're starting to write these formulas out, you're going to have to know what the ID number is and what the subgraph number is, because that's how you're going to refer to them in the formula. It's not coding, okay? It's not like you have to be a C++, C# developer. I am not one, all right? So if I can do this, I'm convinced that anybody here can do this, and probably a lot of people here can do it better than I can. All right, but the key thing to understand when you're devising these sort of Excel-like syntax formulas is to be able to understand what the ID number and the subgraph is that you're referring to. All right, look at my formula for the color background study. Okay, color background based on alert condition. The blue, see we get the blue behavior. Look at the alert, look at the alerts tab. Here's the formula. Okay, it's actually not that complicated. It might look a little intimidating when you look at this the first time as someone who's never done this before, but let's just break it down with Notepad. All right, this is something I do all the time. So if you recall, the study angle, all right, for study angle, the first study angle, which is the shorter one, that was going to be ID3.SG1. That's how we refer to it. So you can use an ID:3 or ID:3. Okay, you have to use something in there. I use the dot. So ID3.SG1, that's our study angle number 1. Okay, ID4.SG1, that's our study angle number 2. And then if you look at ID5, okay, that's the overlay from the 60-minute, ID5 subgraph number 1. Okay, so when we put the formula in here, all right, ID5.SG1, we now have a way to identify when all 3 of the study angles are going to be greater than a certain figure. In this case, in my case, at least in this example, 0. So we're going to create a formula that only will tell us a visual notification if all 3 of the criteria we're looking for are true at the same time. And if we look at that color background study here again, and you look at this piece by piece with this notepad present, you will see that it's not that difficult. What you basically have to do is write each code separately and then put them next to each other separated by a comma and put the whole thing in a parentheses with the word and in front. So when you look at this the first time, even though this is not that difficult of a formula, it can still be intimidating because how are you going to learn how to do this and all that, but it's really not that bad. You just have to do it piece by piece. The ID6 and ID7, that's the color background studies. We're not really referring to those, so I'm going to get rid of them. And we're not really referring to the moving averages here. We really only care about the angles of the moving average, so I'm getting rid of those too. There's really only 3 pieces to the study. All right, and here is how we would do the formula. You would say, okay, the first one is I want to make sure that the 8 EMA and the 34 EMA study angles are greater than 0. So you would do ID3.SG1 is greater than 0. That's our first piece of the formula. Okay, and then you would separate it by a comma and say, okay, ID4.SG1 is greater than 0. That means that the study angle number 2, which is of the 34, that is greater than 0. And then study angle number 3, ID5.SG1 greater than 0. 3 separate conditions, all separated by a comma. Just put the word and in front and put the whole thing in a giant parentheses. You copy paste this into that area above, and that's it. So when you look at the formulas, don't be intimidated by how complicated they can get. If you are using a lot of different studies and you're referring to all kinds of different things, yeah, these formulas can get a little long, and you just got to make sure you have the right number of parentheses and the commas in the right spot. 99% of the errors that people make when they're trying to do this have to do with missing a comma or missing a parentheses. If you can check your work without going brain dead, I know sometimes it can be hard to be looking at this and making sure everything's in the right spot. 99% of the errors are going to be related to forgetting to put a closed parentheses on or forgetting to put a comma in or something like that. You get an error message that says something like this. Watch, I delete this parentheses, push apply. Okay, the error log comes up and it's telling me that something's wrong. It's a syntax error right here, syntax. So if you see a syntax error like that in the alert log, which will come up automatically if you're trying to display an alert that's not valid, that's what's going to happen. All right, so I just push apply and then it goes back. All right, now let's look at the opposite direction, okay? So color background based on alert condition. Look at the direction of the greater than, less than stuff. Okay, these are negative, -0, less than 0. So ID3.sg1, ID4.sg1, ID5.sg1, that means that 3 angles, 2 from the 5-minute, 1 from the 60-minute, of those moving averages are all negative. They're all less than 0, separated by a comma, parentheses, the word and in front. So the cool thing about this idea is not that this particular system failed miserably today's trading day, but the idea here is that the objective is to start getting the wheels turning about the setups you actually use in your trading. Because what most people do is they end up buying a lot of indicators, or they're trying to make this work. They're getting a lot of information and chat rooms and all that, and you end up with these charts that are just clobbered with data and indicators, and you find that a lot of it you're not actually using at all. And you might argue that its presence is a distraction. And there's probably been situations where it's like, you watch some guy do a trading related video, and then the next day you added that on there, and then you missed one of your good trades because it was there, and you're like, God bless it, if I hadn't listened to that guy, I wouldn't have done that. I would have followed my original game plan. That's going to be true a lot. Okay, that's going to be true often. All right, it's not necessarily. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be out there, looking for information, but just be aware that the more stuff you cram onto the screen, the more cluttered things get physically and also mentally. And an example of what might happen at the end of this process when you start believing that you've got some kind of an edge is you could actually hide the individual studies. Excuse me. So I just hide the study angles like this, just hide them one by one. And what you end up with is a really clean chart with just some highlighted areas, okay? And it's not necessarily just an indicator. It could be stay out of the market when the background is colored. Okay, here's an example of that. I'm just going to do this real quick because we're not going to go a full hour today. I have a couple other things I want to do in terms of videos. But here's just a super easy example. Let's just say that I had the S&P up here and I have the ADX. Okay, I'm adding the ADX. Okay, there's the ADX, kind of hard to see. I know I'm ripping through this, but I just want to at least get it up on the screen. So here's our ADX, nice thick line, value label, and we can see the ADX here. Okay, now there's a lot of people who tell us, I want to stay out of the market when the ADX is less than a certain number for this reason or that. Maybe there's not enough movement. Maybe I tend to get chopped up during that time period, that sort of thing. Color background based on alert condition. We're looking at the ADX, which is ID1. The ADX only has, thankfully, one subgraph, SG1. So I'm just going to add color background like this. And I'll just say when the ID1.SG1 is less than 12. When it's less than 12, tell me. And we can make the color a little less obscene, like this. And what you end up with is just a zone, and you might have these no trade sorts of conditions. So if the market is right on top of its moving average, where it's not extended at all, I don't want to trade during that time. When the ADX is very low, I don't want to trade during that time. When the volume of the current bar is less than the moving average of the last 20 bars, I don't want to trade during that time. This idea doesn't have to necessarily be an entry signal. It could also be a situation that comes up when when the market is too flat or not volatile enough for you to care about it. Whereas you originally may have gotten into some trades just because you got bored or you got sucked into something. But here you're letting the chart take the responsibility of allowing you as a self-directed trader to get into the position. It's so much easier to just default and say, chart said no, I don't have to do it. Let the chart take the responsibility off of you. All right. The only thing that we have thought about in terms of how to help people with that idea is you need to have someone there in person who's going to slap you in the back of the head every time you make a mistake that came out of boredom or lack of focus, or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of resources, and you probably don't either. And there's no way to really get that kind of enforcement that you would get if you were working on a trading floor somewhere. But by allowing the chart to dictate to you whether or not it's okay to get into a position, you are taking some of the responsibility off of yourself and letting the technology handle it. It's a fascinating idea. And you might find that it absolves you of some of the guilt or the responsibility of doing something or not doing something you should have or shouldn't have done. And you may cause yourself to miss some things, but at least you can defer to the rule. And that's good practice as well. Not everybody here is wired perfectly to make great trading decisions when they are busy responding to the physiological response to risk that exists in this business. And so again, it's about taking it off of you and letting the chart handle some of it. Now, that means that, yeah, you do have to have some semblance of what you believe to be an edge. Okay, you can't just, make it up and stick with it forever. You have to be malleable, you have to be nimble, you have to look at volatility. We've seen obviously great examples of that over the last couple of weeks, but there are most people that we talk to, not all, but most people think that they're at least kind of close to having a series of conditions where if those things line up, they have a decent chance at a win. And we get that feedback a lot, but the problem is people miss it, or they don't follow the rule, or there's situations like we're describing here that are the opposite, where it's like, no matter if I get in the market and the market is behaving this way, I almost always lose. Well, why not write a condition that will notify you when those losing conditions are true? You just have to be able to define them. That's the hard part. But the mechanics of doing it with the use of this program and the support we provide, we do not think are are unattainable in terms of expertise. So that is that's basically what I wanted to get across today. I think the big takeaway here is the use, and I'm going to put these studies back on the chart here for a second. The big takeaway is the idea that it is possible to take a piece of data or a data point from one time frame and put it onto another using this method. The thing you want to be aware of is that if you are going to refer to something that looks at the prior value of the same study, it's not really going to make sense if you have the chart displayed to be synced together. So again, does everybody understand what I'm getting at with that? Where if I have this match source bars to destination bars selected, okay, does everybody understand how that changes the behavior of the study? Okay, it definitely changes it. Okay, because now we're looking back and we're saying, okay, this is the current value all, for this entire 1 hour period. It will definitely change the output. All right, it will definitely change the output, because in this situation here, these numbers are going to be, greater or less than zero during, certain times when the other ones will not. Okay. Skip wants to see the formula again. So let's just go back to the alerts. And one thing I forgot to mention is if you want a copy of the chartbook file to use on your own, then send an email to your representative in our office, and we will get a copy of the chart to you so you can use it by yourself. All you have to do, the only criteria for that are you must have a demo or a live account with us. Okay, you must have a demo or a live account. That's it. We will give you the file. We will give you copies of these. This presentation will be up in the Charting Club within a day or so. Probably be up on YouTube as well. So the combination of having the chart file itself, having access to the actual chart book, and some feedback from us, we think is a good place to begin. All right. So hopefully you found it useful. I think that's probably where we will wrap it up today. I got some more input late in the week. I'm going to try to incorporate that into next week's presentation as well, among other things. So I will probably leave it there for now. I appreciate everybody coming to the event and listening to me today. I know it was brief, but I want to try to focus these presentations a little bit more on a specific topic, and here today really was about the one time frame to the other. So hopefully you got something out of it. We appreciate it. I will make sure to get this chart book file ready to go for anybody who wants it. Just send an email to your representative in our office, and we will get you everything you need. All right. Okay, everybody, thank you again. I'm going to read some risk stuff one more time, and we'll close the room up. We'll have this online within a couple of days. We will see you soon. Thank you again. Everybody have a great night. All right, folks, trading futures, options on futures, and retail off-exchange foreign currency transactions involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances, knowledge, and financial resources. You may lose all or more of your initial investment. Opinions, market data, and recommendations are subject to change at any time. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Thank you again. Thanks again, folks. Bye-bye.